I think little boys are taught early on to be, for lack of a better word, militaristic. They're, the pack mentality, the sacrifice mentality, the we're a group, we're a team, those kinds of things, where girls are more individual. I mean, they have their social groups, but it's a social group is a whole different deal than a militaristic thing. And so it's not as much now as it used to be. It used to be a whole lot worse. I think it's evened out to some degree. But I struggled a little bit when I started trying to understand the mentality of the hierarchy, the yes ma'ams and the yes sirs, and the, like, it just didn't really click with me for a long time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. Today, we are joined by Grandmaster Diane Reeve Kirby from Vision Martial Arts Center out in Plano, Texas. Grandmaster Kirby, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. And we wanted to get to the topic of, women in the martial arts. It's something that I've, been very interested in. Obviously, we have a lot of women coming into our school all the time. And my wife is also a female martial artist, and she has a lot of things I think would be able to say on this topic. But even still, I find it a mystery in some ways. Not a mystery, but an interesting, different dynamic why women do martial arts versus men do martial arts sometimes. And I feel like if I can get a little more insight into that, I can better serve them. So one of the reasons why I want to bring you on and talk to you about that. But before we get started in that direction, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in the martial arts, maybe what inspired you, and how you ended up running your own school here in Plano, Texas?
Sure. I start with my nursing career. When I graduated from high school, there were about 3 options for women at that time. You could be a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. And I couldn't type, and I hated school. So that kind of left nursing. And I got into nursing, had gotten into some administrative positions and things like that. And it got to be pretty stressful. I was raising a family. I had a couple of girls at home, and the career and the family and the whole situation put a lot of stress on me. And I had talked to a couple of people who said that, you ought to try karate because it's really good for stress relief. And so I looked around, and I lived in the North Texas area. I was outside of Plano, but pretty close. And there was nothing in Plano at the time. This is quite some time ago, like 37 years ago. I always say I've been in martial arts for 37 years. That means I started when I was 2, but that's not quite right. So I looked around, nothing in Plano. I called Richardson, and they said, well, yeah, you can come in. It's $240, and in 6 months you'll be a green belt. And I said, what's a green belt? So the next venture was YMCA in Richardson, and I started training under Grandmaster Keith Yates. He was a 5th degree black belt at the time. And that started my martial arts career. I went with my daughter the first few months. She decided that she didn't want to do karate anymore because she didn't like to hit people. And I said, well, that's okay, honey. You don't have to go, but mommy likes to hit people. So mommy's going to go. That's kind of how it started.
Yes, that's awesome. So how long have you been running your own school?
I opened my school as a third degree black belt in 1995. So in August, it would be 27 years, although my retirement party is set for this Saturday. I've sold the school now.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us about what this experience was like starting your own martial arts school. Did challenges in the martial arts begin before then, like back when you were training? And if so, what were those challenges?
Well, there were a lot of challenges along the way, of course. I had a lot of support. There were there were 4 women in the class that I started in. There were probably about 50 people in the class. And out of those 4 women, and they were various ranks, but as I rose through the ranks a little bit, kind of each one of them dropped off. And so I was privileged and honored to be the first woman that my instructor promoted to black belt. I had also expanded my martial arts training to another school because the YMCA once a week wasn't doing it for me. So there were some women in that school that were mentors to me and helped me with my martial arts training and being a female in martial arts. I found that I tried not to make it any different, that it was me versus any of the guys. I stayed after class to spar just because I felt like I needed the sparring. Grandmaster Gates was I think a little worried that he was going to lose me too. So typically in class, I wouldn't get to fight anybody except the women and the kids. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm not going to learn how to defend myself very well if I only fight women and kids. So I stayed after and fought with the guys. So, it's kind of been an interesting journey. People kind of raise their eyebrows a little bit when you say you're the owner of a martial arts school when you're a female.
Now that you,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, now that you have your own school, and obviously, or you did until just recently, and you're partnering up men and women. I mean, I myself do that a lot. Like I'll partner women up with other women and men up with other men if I can. Sometimes I can't, so I just partner them up. But they seem to be more comfortable training with other women at this similar level of intensity. But I have heard that, kind of comment, like some women don't want to train with other women. They want to be able to be treated just like men and train with other men. So do you purposely partner them up with men, having had that experience and feeling that way about your training?
It depends on the individual. I kind of look at it as an individual basis, and sometimes it's a growth process. Well, a lot of women come in, and I even have a whole separate business, Action Self-Defense, where I teach a one-time self-defense class because a lot of women want to know something so that they don't feel like they're looking over their shoulder all the time, and they'd know what to do if there was something that occurred that they would need to take care of themselves. But they don't want to get a black belt. They don't want to spend, they don't want to put the uniforms on. They don't want to do the sparring with the guys. They just want to know a couple of self-defense techniques. But as an individual, as I assess the students as they come in, I kind of look at them and make a judgment call on whether or not they're ready to spar at whatever particular level, whether it be kids or women or men. There are some women that are out there just like me that, hey, I'll spar anybody. And then other ones kind of have to be eased into it a little bit, I think. It also depends on their history. There are a lot of women in martial arts that come in with what I call ghosts, prior abuses or triggers and things like that. So you have to be careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, what attracts women to the martial arts, you think? And is that any different than what attracts men to martial arts?
I don't know. I think there are things that are the same and there are things that different. Of course, our school is like a lot of schools. We're about 50% self-defense and we're 50% character development. So we emphasize the confidence and the perseverance and the indomitable spirit and those things that help people in life, not only on the dojo, but also in life. But, there are differences in that it's a lot more difficult, I think, for a woman to do it. As a female martial arts school owner, I get a higher percentage of women, and I have a whole lot of women black belts. But I think as time has gone on and women have become more empowered, it's more common now for women to start martial arts than it used to be a long time ago. Like I say, it was the first one that my instructor had promoted to black belt. And I was going to another dojo close to where I lived. And on my second degree black belt test, there were 4 women black belts in the room. And we got a picture together because it was so unheard of that you would see 4 women black belts in the same place.
Yes, ma'am. So I do have a question about the kind of demographics. So you mentioned, being a female martial arts school owner. I was curious about this, before the interview. Early on, have you seen a shift in demographics from early on to, it's been almost 30 years now. Do you feel like the amount of women coming in has been consistent? You said like you have had a lot of women enroll in the program. Do you feel like in the early days that was any different? Were there a lot of guys or kids or, just people coming in saying, let me try this? And then over time, did it become more of a woman-centered school? And I don't know if your school is woman-centered, but, I'm just curious about the demographics and how that has been for the school.
Initially, I didn't have very many women who started with me. It has grown percentage-wise the longer that I've been in business, but I think a lot of times parents will seek out a female school owner because they feel more comfortable putting their little girls in.
Yes,
and sometimes the little girls are hesitant to get into a class. Some of them are ready for it. Some of them are like, hey, I can hang with the guys. But a lot of times the little girls are a little bit more shy, and they feel a little bit more comfortable. And I have a lot of female instructors as well. So I think that's changed some. I always tell parents that I have a higher than average percentage of women, but I wouldn't call it female centered at all.
Yes,
we have more men always, more guys, more males than females. I've never had a higher percentage of females than males in my school.
Yes, ma'am. I was just talking to Master Olds this morning. We were having an event this weekend, and just tabling, just communicating with the public how we do. And there were so many little girls walking by, and kind of the booth vendor next to me, I just kept talking with her, and she also had prior martial arts experience, but just noting the differences between trying to reach out to the young girls and the young boys, right? Because the young boys, I'm like, hey, you want to buy some nunchucks? And they're like, yes, we want to come and see the weapons. And the young girls, that's not the way that I would say. I tried it a few times. Hey, do you want to come and see our weapons? And they look at me like, who are you? Like, tall, weird guy in that uniform. And so, approaching them in a way that was, do you guys want to practice your punches or kicks today? Or do you have any like special moves that you like to do? There were some girls walking by, like doing cartwheels and doing tricks. And today I said, hey, at our school, we have a tricking class and we do cartwheels, but then we kick somebody in the head afterward. And they were like, wow, that's really fun. And so I actually invited them like over to the booth, and I said, can you do a cartwheel and then try to do a kick after? And they really enjoyed it. They said, wow, I've never even thought about that. And so I think that communication is something that, as a kind of fledgling instructor, I'm a junior instructor here at the school, the communication with the different age groups, but also, the different genders is something I'm really trying to focus on and say, how do I really truly connect with these kids and meet them where they are, and, then meet them on the floor, on the mats, right? And continue to move forward with that.
I think that's a marvelous example of making a transition from something like gymnastics. We have a ballet school next door to us.
Yes, ma'am.
So, traditionally, parents will take their little girls to ballet, and they'll come into the school looking for karate for their little boys because their girls doing ballet next door. So sometimes it takes a while for the girls to make the transition over. Sometimes they don't, but
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You had made mention to the fact that some parents are more excited to train with you as a woman because you have that more of that nurturing vibe, and they just assume that sort of characteristic from a female instructor. You know, I used to live in Korea, and I used to teach and work over there, and we had a female master who worked at the school, and she would always tell me how it was very easy for her to get a job because everyone in the industry wanted her, because in Korean culture, there's a very heavy stigma that like men are kind of quiet and a little bit more harsh, and women are more outgoing and nurturing. And even within the school system, I had some friends who were teaching English over there. They would heavily prefer women over men as teachers in any profession, martial arts or whatever it might be. So do you think that it's interesting to me, because I feel like in some ways maybe it's an advantage being a woman instructor. You know, I've had, I mean, not in all ways, obviously. There's some ways I could think of that would be very challenging being a female instructor, but I think in that regard, that might be one. I've had some parents come in and they actually are really excited when they hear that Master Sunok, my wife, is a female instructor. Like they're sort of looking for that, especially right now, I feel like.
I think you're right. I think right now it's particularly advantageous to have female instructors in your school. I think the interesting part, and this is a little off topic, but the interesting part, the challenges that I have faced have been less in the martial arts, but more in what do I call it? Regular society. In a social situation, and you're meeting new people, and you know, hi, how are you? My name is so and so, and what do you do for a living? And I say, well, I'm in martial arts school. Oh, you're a black belt, so you can kick my butt, huh? And I get a reaction like that from a lot of the guys, and you know, probably even as men, for guys that you meet that are not martial artists, some guys feel threatened by that. I'll get handshakes that are really, really tight.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's that trick, I'm sure you know, where you put your index finger on the inside of the wrist so it doesn't hurt. And you'd be surprised at how many guys turn red in the face trying to squeeze.
You know, it's interesting because those are a lot of the experiences that I've had in the past. And I feel like pretty much every martial artist kind of goes up through, like, you know, that sort of testing you kind of thing. I've had a number of people come in and challenge me back in the earlier days for my school and stuff. I could see how did that kind of thing happen to you?
Well, I have a story about that. We started age 3. We have a program we used to call Little Dragons, and I had a dragon's dad come in one day and said, "Hey, I'm a brown belt." And I said, "Well, that's really nice, sir. You know, I'm glad you're taking martial arts." He said, "I'd like to spar you." And I said, "Well, that'd be great. Come right in the office and sign this liability waiver, and I'll be happy."
Yes, ma'am.
He didn't. He decided that maybe it wasn't a good time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is.
I've had the other way around though too. And early on, specifically, I had guys that didn't want to hit a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I think that's a big part of it too. I mean, I have certainly, as a man, my experience has been, it's sometimes difficult figuring out what's the right amount of power and physicality with a woman, because every woman is so different. And so you get with a woman, and sometimes women want more than they can handle. You know, I've had women who are like, give it to me real. I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, yeah. And like, no, and they don't do it real. And then they're like, no, give it to me real. And then you hit them and they start crying and they're like, that was too real. That was not what I wanted. So it's just very, very difficult balance. It's like, well,
yeah, especially if they don't know what they want. And you know, women typically don't have that roughhousing experience when they're growing up, and so they don't know what it's like to take a shot.
Mhm.
And they think that you're right, you're absolutely right. They think that they want it, but when they find out what it really feels like, it's not so much.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask, so I noticed on the website, just reading your brief bio, you have a master's degree in education. Is that correct?
Correct.
So with that master's in education, this is something I'm interested in as well. At school, I was doing education studies, not for a particular grade level, but just education in general. I'm curious about how we learn and how we can best take those skills and transfer them into different environments. How have you felt your background in education has influenced your teaching style on the mats? I'm sure it's not just, there's one thing, it's an all-inclusive sort of thing, but are there certain principles or theories you feel you learned in school that you really say this applies to every single class that we teach?
I think the one thing that I learned in my master's program that has carried over in martial arts more than anything is the differences in the way kids learn and the way adults learn. My master's is actually in adult education. I had a minor in elementary ed, but my primary education was adult education. And I tell this to my instructors as I'm teaching. I have an instructor certification program that I'm doing right now, that kids learn, they don't need to know why. They've been in school for long enough that they just absorb information like little sponges. They don't need to know why we do anything. They just want to know. Just teach them what they need to know, and they're fine. Adults need to know why. So there's a lot more explanation that's involved about the why. And then I think that helps adults also be more interested in teaching, because when they know the why of things, then it piques their interest more. I have promoted 5 of my students to master's level, and I have instructors that have been with me 26 out of the 27 years that I've been in business.
Yes, ma'am.
And a couple of them 20 years, then all the way kind of down to 10 or 15 years. So it becomes a lifetime thing, and you guys know that just as well as I do.
It's one of the best things about the martial arts, I feel like, is its longevity, and also how it can affect everyone, men, women, all walks of life. The more introverted person, the more competitive athlete can find a home, I feel like, in the martial arts. Absolutely. So what do you think, like, centrally attracts women to the martial arts? I ran a college program for a long time, and I had a lot of men and women training in this college program. And I get everyone circled up, and I would say, all right, guys, this is all about self-sacrifice. It doesn't matter what challenge we're facing. It's all about taking that bullet for the person you love. And this kind of like, heavy sort of, machismo talk, die for those you love. And all the women would just start like shrinking out of the front, they didn't like that, as much. Now, I'm not saying that all women are like that, but that has been my experience. That, and then also like this sort of like wolf pack talk, like, we're like this clan, those things seem to go over very well, like clan talk and like self-sacrifice talk seem to go over really well with the guys. But the girls, they tend, this is just me being kind of honest about this, kind of want to come in and be their own entity and kind of do their own thing a little bit, and sometimes don't want to put on the funny pajamas as much, that kind of thing. Like, my master, he opened a cardio kickboxing program, and all these moms came flooding in that had been wanting to do martial arts, but they just didn't want to wear the funny pajamas. They just wanted to have, the gloves and just kind of, punch things. And they didn't want to have to say yes, sir, and bow and all that kind of stuff. And that was the flood gauge. Like, they just didn't want those things. So do you think that's true? Is there any truth to that? That's been my experience. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's been sort of my experience. And what attracted you to the martial arts? And how can I get more women? How can I kind of connect with them more in the ways that women are attracted to the martial arts?
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. All right, here's my perspective about that. When little boys and little girls are growing up, they're growing up differently. They're still raised in what I call, I guess, somewhat of a sexist atmosphere. I think little boys are taught early on to be, for lack of a better word, militaristic. They're, the pack mentality, the sacrifice mentality, the we're a group, we're a team, those kinds of things, where little girls are more individual. I mean, they have their social groups, but it's a social group is a whole different deal than a militaristic thing. And so it's not as much now as it used to be. It used to be a whole lot worse. I think it's evened out to some degree. But I struggled a little bit when I started trying to understand the mentality of the hierarchy, the yes ma'ams and the yes sirs, and the, like, it just didn't really click with me for a long time. And the best way that I can describe it is that it's a militaristic kind of a system. You don't ask certain questions to your instructor. Hey, can I test? It's not like school.
Yeah.
It's not really like anything else that women have been taught to do. And so I kind of had to learn that, sometimes the hard way, as to what the protocols were and how to navigate all that. As far as appealing to women, I do think it's easier now than it used to be. There's a lot more women in the military now than there used to be, and high-ranking women. But as far as recruitment, I don't have that experience of being a man trying to recruit women, and so I think it's hard for me to say. A lot of times women will just gravitate to me because I'm female. And so I don't have that to overcome. So I can't, I guess, really give you any advice other than maybe letting them know that you understand, if your wife's doing it and she's been doing it for a long time, that kind of from her perspective, what she's gone through and the benefits that she's seen by persevering.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So have you noticed more women? Like, I know Jesse kind of alluded to this before, but I'm not sure if I remember what your response was. More women in the martial arts? Because I certainly have felt that way with our school. I mean, we have, when I first opened my school, I made the men's locker room a little bit bigger than the women's locker room because I was anticipating just having more men than women. But I feel like we have about 50-50 men and women in our school. I mean, it's a really good split. And I've been so surprised. I mean, I shouldn't be, because I think women need martial arts more than men,
Yeah.
But it's a good surprise, I feel like.
Well, I think that because our society is how it is, and there's so much news about women being victimized, and there's the Me Too movement, there's all kinds of things in the media about how vulnerable women are and how they need to protect themselves, things like that. It used to be, you didn't have to protect yourself because the guy was next to you and he's going to take care of you. And that's just not the way it is.
Yes, ma'am. Off of that, real quick, again, I was at this event this weekend, and sometimes I would see, especially like teenage girls, right? Or, early teens, maybe in that area, but more the girls that are having boyfriends, right? And they've got their boyfriends walking around with them. And sometimes the boyfriends would be lagging behind, and I would reach out to the girls. I would say, do either of you, or like, do you have any self-defense experience, right? Like, are you interested in self-defense training, right? Or martial arts, or, you working on your punches or kicks? And then I didn't realize, then the boyfriend would walk up behind and be like, no, it's all right, bud. And I'm like, yes and no, right? Like, it's great that you feel confident that you're going to be able to defend your significant other, but you're not always going to be there, bro, right? Like it's not
Yeah,
it's not the same.
yeah.
And I really
Well,
felt that this weekend, that sense of, these young girls specifically, not that it's a sense of like, you must train in the martial arts or else, right? But a sense of, this opportunity is open to you as well. There's not a big wall that some people imagine that there is. We want to be inclusive. We want to invite, girls and boys, just everyone, as Master Old said, all walks of life into the doors, because martial arts has something for everybody.
sure, sure. And I've seen marvelous things happen. We have I have a black belts only class on Tuesday nights, and I'm trying to think about the ratio. I do think I have more girls, women in that class than I do guys, but that varies. It depends on. I mean, it's been more guys than girls at some points in time, but I think the thing that I'm the most gratified by is the number of years that people have spent with me in the martial arts.
Mm.
That really, to me, I've promoted what 215, 200, some between 215, 220 people to black belt. And of course, a lot of more of them men than women, and some move away and this, that, and the other thing. But I have kids that have been with me since they were 3 years old, and they're 15 and 16 years old. And it's just, it just really makes me feel good that, they continue to grow in the martial arts for that period of time, that they feel so strongly about it that they want to stay. Because kids don't stick with much for a very long time these days either. So, and I don't know what that has to do with anything. I just, kind of occurred to me. So it's just a nice thing to have. And I'm sure you have that experience too, where you have people that have been with you for years.
Yeah.
Off of that, just one more thing. So talking about those different age groups, right? You've got the 3-year-olds, which is, that's young. We start at 4, sometimes 3.5, but the 3-year-olds, sometimes they come in and they're just, they don't really know what to do with their bodies. And they're like, why am I in here? And mom and dad are out there. Are there specific topics or realms of the martial arts that you feel most energized by, excited by teaching to specific age groups? With those little dragons, or like the little warriors, that's what our program is called. I find myself, going in and saying, hey guys, like, I like to move a little slow and say, show me how still you can sit, things like that. Whereas with the teenagers or the high school seniors, all right, let's really move our bodies in a way that we've never moved them before. I'm just curious about your experience there, and if there's anything specific focal points that you really feel bring that class to the next level.
Now I think you pretty much nailed it. The little kids, you're right. Teaching them to stand still is probably the most important thing. And you have to look at it. I look at it a lot of times from the parent's point of view. Like, what's going to make this parent's life easier? What can I do for this child that's going to make this parent's life easier, and still allow the child to grow and to develop and to stay with the martial arts? So, first of all, of course, for the kids, it has to be fun. If it's not fun, they're not going to stick around. But then again, you have to balance that with the discipline and the respect and the focus and concentration that they need to get anywhere in the martial arts. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. And a lot of it's an individual thing too. Some 4-year-olds are just like, they're ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Some 12-year-olds are not ready. And I don't know if you deal with special needs kids or not. We have a lot of special needs kids in our school, and so then that's a whole different ball game as well.
Yeah.
But I've seen martial arts turn special needs kids around phenomenally.
Yeah, I've had such a trouble trying to figure out when the minimum age is to start, because kids are just so different, you know. Like you get a kid. I had a kid who was still 2. He wasn't even quite 3, and he was actually able, like, ready to do the program. And then I've had kids who are like 4.5, 5, and they're still not ready. And it's like, well, you know, I had to put something on the website, you know, 3, we start at 3, or we start at 4. Whatever you put down, the parent is very offended if their kid's not ready. So it's like, oh, this is really challenging. Like, you know, I'll sit down and say he's close, but I think we need another 6 months of like development, because some kids, they're not even able to verbalize their internal like thoughts and what's going on with them yet. And at that point, it's very difficult to work with them.
Yeah, and in fairness, you know, we did kind of make a turn. We used to take 3-year-olds. We say we take 4 to 6-year-olds. If there's a 3-year-old that comes in, you know, we'll look at them depending on how close they are to 4. But we've stopped advertising 3-year-olds. We've gone to 4. We did for years, and I had one little girl I was talking about that started with me when she was 3, and she's 17 now. She was actually 2 weeks shy of 3 years old, and her dad twisted my arm. And for years, this little girl would be in class and she'd be picking the daisies out of the air. I'm telling you, she's stuck with it though, and she's one tough young lady.
Nice.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always a process.
Yeah. So to kind of get back on topic, one thing I wanted to discuss is the mindset of a martial artist. And, you know, like I like to say, I'm not sure what the exact ratio is, but it's like, you know, self-defense is like 50% mental, 50% technique, because if you don't have a strong mind, that like sort of inner fire, you better bet the person on the street who's trying to attack you is mentally tough. So if you don't have that mental toughness, it's going to be very hard to defend yourself. And one thing that I've noticed, even outside of martial arts training with women, is they sometimes don't even know how tough they are. You know, like I'll wrestle with a woman sometimes, like a young girl, and she'll just like grab my head and just knee me right in the face. And I'm like, wait, whoa. This is like we're really jumping up here in aggression. And then other times, you know, when they get on the mat and you're working with them, they can be very timid. Like they need to, you know, realize how strong they really are inside. And that's been one of the central pillars of my working with women, is just trying to build up that confidence. Do you think, have you experienced similar things working with women? Do you agree with that? And if so, then what are some of your strategies for improving women's self-confidence? Because I think that's going to be really, really important for their ability. They can have all the skill in the world. And I find sometimes women develop technically much faster than men because they're smaller and stuff like that. But the inner fire is sometimes very hard to pull out of them.
Yeah, the mindset is tough. I use a lot of stories. I don't know whether I came up in a system where martial arts stories were just part of the whole experience. You know, to give you a little background, my Mr. Yates trained under Alan Steen, the father of Texas Blood and Guts Karate. And then I was training also under J. Pat Burleson, who was the father of American Sport Karate. Both of those guys, you know, were promoted by Diane Reeve, who brought Taekwondo to America. Mm-hmm. So we came up in it's a tough system. But the stories that were told, I think, kind of give people the idea of the mindset that's necessary and the kind of fortitude that you have to have in life, and that martial arts will teach you that fortitude if you'll open your mind and let it happen. How you do that, I guess, to me, depends on the individual. A lot of people, my husband teaches also, and he's been in martial arts longer than I have. So he's a 9th degree. And his coaching ability is just phenomenal. and he will encourage people in such a way that it really builds them up. I've seen the opposite. I've seen where, instructors saying, well, you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, you're not doing that right. And I don't think that builds them up to the degree that they could be built up if you encourage them and you keep them on track and you tweak them just a little bit at a time. I think that helps. I use a lot of examples from real life too. There's some things that have happened in my life, and I'm really honest about it with my students, that if I hadn't been a black belt, I'm not sure I'd have survived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of people go through that. And I think a lot of people that go through situations that are difficult would be a lot better off if they were black belt. And that's one of the reasons why I teach it. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that's a great pitch for the martial arts for sure. That's so true. Absolutely. You kind of answered the question indirectly with how you're talking about how your husband teaches by just giving a little bit of feedback, but a lot of positivity. And one of the things that I try to tell my students is like, we have a saying, I say, we want just one foot in the fire, because if you get fully in the fire, you're just getting incinerated and you can't really get stronger. And if you do get stronger, you become sort of feral, you become almost twisted by that intensity of the situation. But if you don't put any foot in the fire, you never toughen up. And I think that's what that kind of teaching that you were talking about your husband doing, it does basically. I know a lot of young instructors, when they first start teaching, they got a lot to share and they want to share it all at once. And so they get the new student out there and they're like, okay, you got to bend your knee here, you got to make that leg straight, you got to do this, you got to do that. And the person gets so mixed up, they can't focus on any of it because there's too many things for them to focus on. And they just start going downhill instead of uphill with their technique. And that's too much. That's like 2 feet in the fire, just like too intense. But you need some honest, constructive criticism, but then you also need to build them up and say, yeah, that's looking right, you're looking good,
Well, and you're absolutely right. And I really love that example of 1 foot in the fire at a time. I've not heard that before, but I'm going to use that. I think that's really great. And it's true because, you're right. You can't eat an elephant all in one bite. Kind of have to take it a little bit at a time. But that encouragement along the way, you're doing good, you can do this, you got this. And, we had a black belt test on Saturday, and I have a little girl who has struggled with some on the spectrum kind of situations. So we were worried about her. We were worried about her getting through it and whether or not she could do it without having a meltdown. And she came close, but we got her through it. And she, I think, is going to benefit from this experience for the rest of her life. I think it'll make a huge difference for her.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
There's no doubt about that. But I think martial arts is one of the best things you can do, and it affects your whole life. You were mentioning that if you hadn't been a black belt, you might not have gotten through certain things in your life, and there's no doubt that that's true for me. And I think it's not because I have a black belt, and I'm sure you feel the same way, but it's because I have a black belt mindset, and it's something that develops at a white belt level. Obviously it's something that takes years and years to develop fully, but begins at the very beginning of your training. And, like a lot of times I see my students go off and succeed in other ways, they move on from martial arts, but they go off and they get a great job at a big company. And I say, it's that black belt leadership.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. And I think, the one thing that I want my students to know is that, if you're a black belt, you can do anything. I just think that's a powerful thing to carry with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that is actually a very good note to end on. Just any final questions for Grandmaster Kirby?
I do have a final question bouncing off of that final statement. If you're a black belt, you can do anything. So Grandmaster Kirby, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, you are having a retirement party coming up here very soon. And my question to you is, now that you are transitioning into this next stage of life, right? What is it that your black belt mindset is taking you into? What's coming next for you that you're looking forward to?
I wish I knew. I have never retired before.
Yes,
And,
ma'am.
I was talking to one of my friends last night and she said, I'm not sure how this is going to go for you because you've been, busy all your life and what's this going to be like? And, like I say, I still have my action self-defense thing that I'm doing. And so I'm sure that will expand some. Tim and I both have already decided that we're building a dojo in the backyard because neither one of us can stop training. That's just not an option. So I'm sure I'm going to work my way through it. I think for a little bit, I'm staying on at the school in an advisory capacity for the new owners for another month or so. So once I'm able to stop thinking about the business end of it, I think that as I move through this next month or so, I'll be able to find my way through and figure out what I'm going to do.
Yes, ma'am. I think that perfectly encapsulates, a lot of what we've been talking about. Because even when faced with retirement, that black belt spirit is, well, I'll work my way through it, right? That's exactly it.
Well, Grandmaster Kirby, it's been a true pleasure having you on. Thank you for sharing your insight on, being a woman in the martial arts and starting a martial arts school as a female instructor. You're always welcome back on the show. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak for women to a certain degree in the martial arts. And I think you guys are doing a great job. I hope you continue with this and have a lot of success with it.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
ma'am.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.